Welcome to Revenue Mind, a podcast that gives revenue leaders a platform to talk about mental health. I'm personally a big advocate of mental health and hope these insights, stories, and guts to open up, inspire, enlighten, and resonate with you. Now onto the episode. Welcome to the Revenue Mind podcast, where leaders talk about all things mental health. I'm Julie, your host, and a big welcome to Alex. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Julie. It's good to be here.
Super excited to dive into the questions. But before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am from San Francisco, been in Portland the last maybe 10 or so years. I'm the founder of Revenue Zen, a B2B marketing agency, and a LinkedIn engagement SaaS. Apart from that, I'm an investor and acquirer of other businesses and coach to several founders, and mostly of agencies, but a couple of SaaS companies. And yeah, I'm feeling like every year of life gets a little bit better. That's me and what I'm doing.
I love that perspective. That's awesome. And your LinkedIn posts are bomb. I think you posted one this morning. Do you mind telling the audience what it was about?
Oh, it was a post about a lesson learned from my time at a catering job where I should have followed through on something, but I assumed someone else had it. My manager set me straight. And so I learned a valuable lesson of follow through from not bringing a guest coffee that asked for coffee. And I said I would do it, but instead I would get them coffee. And I assumed one would bring them coffee. He was going around. But ownership dictates that I make sure that guest got coffee. And I didn't. So I didn't have to.
That's a great marketing lesson. But there's always something you learn. At every job that I've ever had, I've taken something from how to open boxes to how to make everything super organized. So now onto the questions. During our conversation, you touched on the particular kind of pressure that comes with revenue roles. How has this impacted your mental well-being differently than roles for performance isn't constantly under the microscope?
It's hard to remember a role where it wasn't under the microscope so much as far as performance, unless we're talking about a part-time job. But as I started in sales and then was in sales and sales leadership, and then after that, entrepreneur, there's never been a time when it wasn't. I'd say I'm more resilient for sure. So there's definitely been some positives. The negatives to contend with are that your monthly income is dependent on how well you do and whether people say yes to certain things or no. So learning to accept variability and to use that opportunity to get better has been a really good opportunity, actually. I think being in a performance-based role for me has been great for that reason. I think it's made me less focused on the traditional kind of security that most people need or think they need. And so it's just made me better in that way. But at the same time, it's week one of COVID was really hard because I didn't have that just everyone takes some time to be at home and just bake sourdough and watch Netflix. And it was the opposite. I was like, I have to show up more than ever to grow and retain and pay the bills and so forth in this time. So there have been times when it was really hard, but on balance, it's been, I think more people should be in a performance-based, at least to some extent, performance-based role because of the resilience it creates.
Completely agree. And I think the resilience and it gives you a sense of balance and structure, something that, and a sense of purpose too. Love that. So just pivoting a little bit, it's interesting you mentioned the addictive nature of some work environments and the pursuit of achievement. How do you personally walk the line between ambitiously being driven and not falling into the trap of being obsessed with success?
In any career, you can have this drive for money that doesn't really have an end. I think a couple of things have been really helpful. One is to know why you are driving for success and making money from it. I assume those two are connected for most people, but why are you making money? There can be a goal. You can have a certain line in the sand that doesn't change except for inflation, around which certain things can change. So if you've accumulated a certain amount, you can actually behave differently, choose different jobs, take more time off and so forth. Do you prioritize accumulating wealth through income, or are you prioritizing family health, physical health, or other things? I think too, the fact that people often do better in a revenue or marketing role and then increase their lifestyle is tough and creates that sort of addictive behavior because you have an uncertain reward system, like a variable reward system at your job where you might make more money if you do certain things. If the quarter goes well, the stock goes up, So you have this like kind of slot machine like behavior. So just being aware of that, incredibly important. And then not increasing your lifestyle in accordance with how much you make is also ideal. I think there's actually a good aspect of revenue rules in this way, because if your base salary is not the majority of your compensation, then you learn to live on a lower amount. You're not used to spending that every month. Whereas if you're a VP of marketing and 80% of your comp is base, then you're probably going to adjust your lifestyle up to your base. And the bonus amount won't let you actually suck any of that away. Okay, I can see that you've really drawn a line in the sand and you've brought your lifestyle up to exactly this number, and you're going to freak out if you don't get it. So yeah, if you can undo that and be aware of it, then it'll be a lot easier to accommodate like a performance-based environment. It doesn't require you to maintain that salary every day, every paycheck to keep it, because then it won't be so addictive about it. It'll be just like, let's try for more. Let's play the game well, but it's not so desperately necessary. But yeah, the combination of the variable reward system at work, where you might get money, you might not, and then the adjustment of lifestyle up to an increasing base, those two things together can be really tricky unless you're first aware of them. So just the mindful awareness of those two things happening, I think, has been huge to avoid that. And if you avoid that, then you can actually accumulate more of the income you bring in without needing to constantly get more to afford all the stuff that you want.
I'd love to hear about your personal story with mental health.
I think that what I described with becoming aware of how I was thinking about success and ambition was one of the first things. I think I had several years ago this thought that if I were to heal some of these thought patterns, I would probably be slightly worse in the short term at some of these things. In other words, like having a chip on my shoulder was really helping me in some areas. And I think that's true. Like you can work longer and harder and be more manically passionate about what you're doing if you have a need to succeed that's above and beyond just a healthy drive. And I had that. And I'm pleased to say that I think I was wrong. I think that my potential is more uncapped with less of that manic drive. So I can go from manic ambition to putting that in perspective to wanting to do well and achieving meaning and purpose through my work rather than it being something I need to prove. But a lot of people I think are going around thinking I need to prove a lot to someone in their life, whether it's themselves, a parent, another figure that they have something to prove to. And if we can somehow alchemize that from the need to prove into that a desire to play the game and live a life well lived and work as part of that, then that's super healthy. And I think that you can go further as a result. I'm going to try to prove that as I've taken that part of my journey. I think I'm now in the chapter where I really don't have a lot to prove. And I'm just like, okay, let's do and build and find things that are meaningful and work on them without it being a need. So going from like a need to you don't need to I want. Need, don't need, want is a really great pattern to go through. There's that middle part of don't need where you might actually do a little bit worse because you don't need to as much and you haven't found that next thing. But I think if more people went past that, that would be better, because there's a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn too, you can tell from reading what they post that they have a lot to prove. And it's going to be a long hamster wheel of a career if we never get past that point.
Completely agree. When I lost my job a couple months ago, there was a company-wide layoff, and I've always had this innate drive. I called 50 labels back in college until I got a record label internship, that kind of manic drive that you spoke about. But I agree. One thing that I wish I did was find balance. My boyfriend called it bulldozing. I basically was up at 6 a.m., applying for jobs until 6 p.m., passing out for 2 hours, waking up, maybe doing something for myself, probably not, and then going back to sleep. And it's just, and what's the point? If I space it out a little bit, just a little bit, maybe I could have been a little more sane. That's like the after action review that I have. What did I learn from this? Maybe taking my dog on a longer walk or exercising and not just having that tunnel vision of I need to do this. I have to prove this to myself. I have to be XYZ. So I love that. That really resonated with me.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more, there's different roles that people will want to hire you for if you're in desperate need to prove versus drive. A lot of people want to hire lower level roles for people that have that desperate need to prove because they're exploiting the desperately need to prove, into like an SDR, like an early stage growth role. But you don't hire executives like that, which is the difference. You don't hire executives with that big a chip on their shoulder. So it's not that you wouldn't get a job in that state of mind, it's that you might not get the right one, or the one that's going to be best for you. Yeah, I don't even think it's about balance only for the sake of balance and for you, but balance for that has this like side benefit for what kind of energy you're putting in the world and who's going to hire for what based on that kind of energy. I think you are making the right. I don't know how far you've gone on that, but if you are choosing that, then I think that's the right choice to do.
It's funny. Once I relaxed, went out to a ski town in Colorado, hung out with my family, went snowboarding, hung out with my puppies. The job ended up working out and it was the right job. And that it's like when you take a step back, that's when things happen. And I learned that the hard way. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
So you significantly emphasize personal growth and mental health in your journey. Could you share a moment or insight that really sparked this focus?
There's been a few. Some of them have been at my first job. I probably did not leave on the best of terms. I could have left more professionally. And that was a moment to zoom out and think about, okay, I thought I don't care about burning these bridges, but I should have. And it was more about who I was as a person than whether these bridges need to be kept or burned. And so that allowed me to zoom out a little bit. Later on, just there's something my sales manager asked, which is at the next job, which was, do you think it's better to be in the heat of it in terms of striving or conflict or whatever, or is the celebration at the end better? And I was like, oh, obviously it's the celebration at the end. He was just like, I don't know about that. But then I thought about it later, and though he didn't deliver that advice in the best way, it did get me thinking, and I think he was right in a way that it's not really about working until one can be idle, but rather about finding a way to enjoy the journey of it, which it seems like obvious advice, but I don't think we apply it to work as much. I think we don't enjoy the journey of work where we could. And I think the moment you meet people who have accumulated enough money to quote unquote retire and then done it, and then after 3 months of watching everything on Netflix and going snowboarding every day, they actually don't enjoy it, like really actually don't. And they go back to doing something, whatever it is. So an inspiration to enjoy the journey of work. And then another moment was when somebody who I was going to go into business with before revenues essentially manipulated me into signing things I shouldn't have signed. And if I wanted to, move forward in my career at all, I pretty much had to either dramatically curtail what I was doing or settle for a huge amount of money. And I accumulated a lot of anger at this person for basically just like, in my view, being a bad person, but having a gotcha moment where the system was probably more in their favor than mine. And there was a moment where I was feeling very angry about this, and I just made a choice to not let it go for their sake, but for mine. And I just felt this like draining energy from head to toe of letting the anger drain out and just thinking, I'm just going to move forward and not let this inhabit me, because it will. It'll stick with me and inhabit me, and this grudge will just eat me alive if I let it. And so more of those moments are great. The moments where you decide to put something down that really doesn't help you at all and is about someone else. But when we decide that what we're feeling is our choice, easy to say and very hard to do when you're in the heat of a very tough moment or time. But being able to get to that point has been invaluable. So yeah, I paid the giant settlement and moved on. And really, I don't know if I would build kind or size of businesses that I did if I hadn't had them. So almost glad it happened in a way. I wish it hadn't, but I think I did bigger things as a result. I have more moments like that all the time where someone says something and they didn't mean to, but it pushes me forwards. Yeah, I would just say to people to stay on the lookout for those types of moments where you can pick up something and learn something, and not even when it's dressed up as advice, it might even be dressed up as something else. But those moments are everywhere if you care to look.
That really resonates with me. Over the past probably 12 years, I've gone through several challenges, and you start thinking to yourself, why me? And if you're religious, you question religion. If you question XYZ in front of you. And in the end, you really can't choose the cards you're dealt, but you can choose what to do with them. And every day is a choice. So I really like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, when I hold grudges, I realize that the person it's hurting the most is me and not the other person. The other person isn't really, they forgot.
Yeah.
They're not really paying attention. They're paying attention. If they're a really good friend, obviously they'll apologize, but most people don't. They're mostly focused on themselves at the
They're
end of the
not
day.
against you. They're just for their own situation.
Yeah.
I chose the name before that, but yeah, the names of my companies thus far have tended to have like mindfulness oriented names just because I've felt, especially in tech and B2B, it's such a aspiration that's missing. And yeah, being able to go through such a journey of ups and downs and just the things we do in revenue are so not Zen that bringing some to it would be good. And even like the actual practice of Zen, which is very strict and formulaic, and there's like a freedom in the form from it, I thought was interesting. A lot of people don't find freedom in the form. They're just everywhere revenuing and this, that, and the other tactic and growth hack and very not Zen. And even more people would do well to pay attention to the freedom in the form from something like actual Zen practice and apply that to what they're doing every day and week, you know, looking at growth, the tactics they're choosing, the people they hire and fire and so forth. So it came from that. But that moment I described came after the naming. Perhaps I was just being inspirational for myself.
That's great. I feel like it was growth at all costs and then efficiency. We had no in between with revenue. So
I
I
like
love
that.
that it's just now we're going to be efficient with half the marketing budget cut. And I really like the sentiment behind your name. All right. So we talked a little bit about toxic work environments. So without getting into specifics, could you share how you managed to keep your mental health in check during those times and any advice that you'd like to offer other people?
I think people will often get tested in those environments, and the world won't set boundaries for you. So you'll need to set them yourself. If your manager asks for a one-on-one at 11 p.m., which happened to me regularly, just declining it and not trying to think of it not as a personal affront, but just as a boundary that you need to maintain. A lot of people assume that company or someone else will maintain boundaries for them, and really nobody will, except you, if you choose to do it. So just not taking it personally is the biggest part of it. Once you've decided to not take it personally and to not think that people are like out to get you and against you, they're really just like, there's chaos, and chaos is the default state of things. Like, okay, chaos is default. Nobody will maintain boundaries with me. I'll maintain my own boundaries. And then just depersonalizing that, it's, again, a lot of the things I've mentioned are tough to do, but that really is the thing to be aware of is, are you maintaining your own boundaries? Sometimes you get an amazing person who will help maintain them for you, like a mentor or someone, but that's a bonus. If you find that person, that's wonderful, but don't rely on them. If you can't change it yourself, if you can't really bring peace to a chaotic environment and yourself through the leadership role, then you might have to leave. But again, don't let it eat you up and don't take it personally. Again, it's not about you. Usually, the company wasn't all out to get you. Maybe in some exception that happened, but I've generally found that it's not about you. It's about everyone's just running around trying to do stuff and they're just not thinking of you. So think of yourself and then make sure that people know how to interact with you, because it'll create a lot of peace around you if you know what your boundaries are and you maintain them calmly. But if you master it, that's a life skill more than just a work skill.
Completely agree on that because that goes back to balance and boundaries. Like onboarding with my HR manager, she said, if you need to block time to do work because your head's down in meetings for 3 days, do it. If you need to go to the doctor, do it. I actually really evaluate jobs. Number one is culture for me. Having certain challenges, I do need a very nurturing, warm culture where you still work really hard, but you have just incredible people. And I'm really happy I found that. And it sounds like your organization and the businesses you built have the same vibe. So that's awesome.
I'd like to think so. We've always been the type of company where that was the thing to do. Like you said, if you have an appointment, that's just your business. But we've been remote from the start, and the way that people work nowadays has always been how we worked for 7+ years. For us, it was an easy transition, just actual work-wise, style-wise, because there was no like, oh, remote, go back to the office. We didn't really have a necessary office to go into in the first place. We also didn't hire junior people for whom it was their first job, so that helped a ton. But yeah, in that sense, it was an easy transition because people were like, I really liked my old job in all ways, except that they wouldn't let me take my kid up from school at 3 p.m. I had to have them do stuff until at least 4:30, and then I could go. Whereas we just said, if your goal is your goal, whenever you want to get it done, as long as you're making your meetings, and that's totally fine. Nobody's looking over your shoulder as to whether you're button seat from 9 to 5 or whatnot. We'd notice if they were missing meetings, not hitting goals generally, and so forth. But that's a different conversation than why were you not at your desk at this time, or why are you not available on Slack? I can't stand that. You have to be a green dot on Slack till 5 p.m. A lot of people say that's a real thing, and it's so foreign to me, and I wouldn't even think about it unless I had people in my life saying online, showing the green dot on Slack until 5. High level people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's silly to me, but some cultures are like that. So good for you for avoiding those.
Good for you for building those.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. The idea that the grass might be greener elsewhere is very common, as cliche as that is. How has your view of what truly constitutes success changed over time, especially given things that you've gone through with mental health?
I think I've tried to make transitions when it actually was the right idea. But there have been a lot of times where I thought something would be much easier, but I have adapted. I just think thought a lot about it before I did. And there's sometimes I think, okay, if I was in this business model or that one, or was not running my own businesses, but employed somewhere, there would be easier things about it. And I've tried to just not look so hard at those things that I lose sight of the benefits of what I had built. So, like, my company started out as mostly a sales and lead gen consultancy. We were doing SDR as a service. I really was thinking the grass might be greener on the side of this other business line that was going really well, which was more like B2B content marketing and SEO. But instead of complaining about the grass being greener, I just walked over to the new grass and we pivoted. Now, I think some people remember when we were an SDR agency, but most people are like, they don't even have a sense of that because we just made that transition. So sometimes the grass is greener. If it really is and you're confident about that, then go do it. Don't complain about it. And I find that if people are complaining and not doing, that's usually a sign that their body's telling them that it might not all be perfect where they're looking. And that's keeping them from acting. In which case, try not to complain so much, right? But it's either you can stay or you can go. But staying and complaining is usually the worst of all worlds. If you're going to go, but don't stick around and do yourself harm in the process and your coworkers harm in the process by being unhappy about it. But also knowing to adapt. I started in financial sales and now I'm running a B2B SEO agency. So plenty of adaptation. I can't say never follow to greener grass, but I've tried not to complain so much about where I am instead of just saying, that to me, if I want to go, I can do it. I can create that bridge over somewhere else. So if you can bias for action, I think you'll be a lot happier.
That really resonates with me. It's funny, like when you want to exercise and you don't, and you keep talking about it and you don't do it. And then you talk about it for another 6 months, still doesn't happen. But when you finally do it and take that leap of faith, and then you start feeling stronger and better. Like I was talking with someone else in my podcast, and I was like, when I spin, my partner says, I'm like Jolie 5.0. Like my mood is just another level. And I'm chasing the high, I'm chasing the dopamine. I completely admit it. And it applies to just all aspects of your life. So I really resonate with that. Are there any essential habits or approaches you found incredibly beneficial while we're on the topic?
For specifically keeping in good health? Yeah, a lot lately, actually. There's the typical, I don't post about it, but I do actually my wife and I start our day with breath work and a cold plunge. So we have a morning routine and we get in the ice bath for 3 minutes and we do Wim Hof breathing while grounding our bare feet on the grass. I don't post about it, but we do. So that's super helpful in terms of like long arc of dopamine release. A cold plunge definitely does that. It feels good to get out and be like shivering, but then more naturally. your body's going to respond by giving you a lot of good feelings over the next several hours. So yeah, I love to laugh at an Instagram influencer. Just here's my ridiculous morning routine, primarily because it's such an exaggerated caricature of it. But some of those things do actually have a lot of science behind them and they will help. I recommend just doing it and not posting on social media about it, which coming from me may seem like laughable, but I actually don't post about most of my life. Other part of this is drilling on physical health because it has been such a good benefit to me is just fixing nutrient deficiencies and going to see a naturopath and getting all my sort of blood and hormones tested and figuring out what my body needs that I'm not getting. I was tired all the time. Now I'm on my supplement routine and I have consistent energy all day. Physical health and gut health will have a huge impact on mental health. And a lot of people make decisions based on what they think is mental health. And it really is physical health. The opposite applies as well. If you're in a bad scenario, only working on physical health won't help. You can't stay in a bad situation or environment with a bad business partner or a boss that is very toxic and only meditate and do breath work, right? Like doing those things won't solve the problem. So it's funny, like the typical mental health benefit activities, right? Like mindfulness, breathing, meditation, gratitude. If physical health is poor, if you're in a bad environment, none of those things are going to actually have much of an impact. I think that's why people laugh off all those things is because they don't work unless you fix the other stuff. Unless your blood sugar and energy levels allow you to have good energy, you won't. No matter all the right breathing you do. You can have the healthiest practices in your life, but if every conversation with your boss triggers you into just a state of absolute overwhelm, none of the other stuff's going to matter. So you have to pair all the mental health benefiting activities with physical and environmental benefiting activities too, or it's not going to work. So that's why I'm investing in all the other things in addition to quote unquote straight up mental health beneficial things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I've had friends that have mental illness and they've been in incredibly abusive situations and they've had to up their medicine. And their psychiatrist said, quit. You can choose to sacrifice your mental health for that $1 million a year paycheck, but you might regret it in some way, shape, or form. So I think it goes back to finding the right place and having a sense of purpose. And it's like you mentioned the 3-prong approach. I really like that. You need to have the physical, mental, and environmental to really sustain and maintain a healthy, balanced life.
Upping your
It's really
and then
great.
doing more meditation while keeping the same trigger in place that was causing it is not going to work. It's not going to have an effect. Your body is telling you what it needs. So just have to listen to it.
Exactly. Yeah. One was a multivitamin. The other was called Pendulum. And my energy is just, well, plus my thin obsession, but my energy, now that my gut is is more balanced and I'm getting the nutrients I need, it doesn't all have to be psychiatric medication for people. It can also be homeopathic. So finding the right balance physically and mentally is great. That's a really solid point. So a couple more questions here. Looking back at your achievements, including successfully exiting a business, congratulations. How have these milestones shaped your mental health? And are there any common misconceptions about the impact of such achievements?
Yeah, I think it goes back to knowing what your lines are for financial success. So I have, as you can imagine from the things I post, I have a detailed financial forecast for household. So for me, like I chose the exit path that wasn't trying to maximize all cash up front because I didn't need it. I knew, okay, what I'm really trying to do, my goal right now is to bias for a certain amount of flow every month from a diversified set of sources. It helped me very confidently choose a path for exiting for revenues in. I'm not actually exited, but I did do like a partial kind of restructuring of my ownership of it and bringing in another partner who mostly acquired us. And so that helped me just say, okay, I'm not just blindly trying to accumulate money. I'm trying to get to a certain place. And the strategy was I get to this place, then I can choose what to work on without as much respect to how much it pays me now. Then you can go further. You can potentially do more fun things. You can build products that don't pay you right now, but might pay you later, rather than saying, I have to have this salary or we're just going to stop paying our bills. So I think people look at it as just, you have to make bunch of money, and we don't really know how much a bunch is, just a bunch, and then you can stop working. But that's not a happiness inducing path at all, because what people miss is once you've become the type of person who can accumulate wealth, you become the type of person who does not really want to be idle. It's really only people who inherited a bunch of money that are okay being idle, and they're really unhappy as well. This notion that you should try for an exit so that you can stop working it might help you not work, but it won't help you be happy. So you may as well figure out what kind of work you really want to do, regardless of how much it pays now or later, and then try to figure out a way to do that. For some people, that's saying, okay, my definition of success is to only buy used cars, live in a modest apartment, and maximize the hell out of my income in a healthy work environment while living way below my means, so I can sock off enough away in treasury bonds that I don't need to choose any shitty environment going forward, and I can start my own business. That is a baby product company, something where I'm probably not going to get a salary for a year. That might be the definition of success, but it's definitely not make more money to buy more stuff or to show how much money you're making. So yeah, in terms of trying to not sacrifice current physical health for long-term success, sure, I could have gone to work in an investment bank, really sacrificed my health in a lot of ways, and probably made more money in the short term. But I would also probably have become somebody who wanted to spend more of that income, and I'd probably have less overall than if I said, okay, I'm going to move from San Francisco to Portland, try to be in like a much less consumption-oriented culture, and to focus on living below my means, buys 95% of my clothes at Costco. And I am that person now. And if I had stayed in San Francisco, I would not be. Probably. That's my version of it. I think just knowing what you're working toward and why will set you free from this how much, why, to do what with. If you can have an answer to those questions, then you'll be a lot happier along the way.
What's your version of happiness?
And specifically, what level of financial success will allow you to have it. And that's a math problem that you can solve. The trouble is it's tricky to solve. It involves a good forecasting spreadsheet, but it is solvable. And that's the thing, is if you can solve it and you're like, okay, I'm not there yet, but I'll probably be there in 2.5 years if I do this. That feels way better than some obscure target that doesn't exist way off in the future that just makes it all feel dreadful. Figure out that target, I think, is a good first step.
Be a great app.
If that's what I thought about building, is like a mint.com or whatever came after it. They don't have that capability. You can't put in cash flow from investments and use that to forecast. And I was like, shit, like you can't even do that in Quicken, like old school Quicken. You can't do that in there either. It's like, man, someone should build that. Stay tuned. We might, but probably take a few years if we do.
You're definitely solving some problems here. Love it. Yeah, for sure. So finally, as you look ahead, how do you see your approach to mental health evolving, especially as you tackle the ups and downs of career, life, personal, professional?
I'm heading into a phase where that is likely to be more tumultuous. I think I won't say I've completed the project with revenues in, but there's a different CEO. My business partner is CEO. And there's a transition that's been made. And even though I'm really in it with growing that SaaS, there is a period after you finish a big project in whatever finishing means, where you have to replace some identity that's been lost. I'm definitely in that phase now where I was revenues in for a long time. That was like me. It's what I thought about. It's what I did. Founder and CEO of this, founder and CEO of revenues. It's not true anymore. It was off the tongue because it was so bound up. But take that away and some part of you needs to be reformed, right? Like wave comes in and washes out the sandcastle and now you're just beach, which is good. There's a calmness of that. There's also some needing to be reformed and not wanting to jump into reforming that identity with something else right away. I don't want a rebound career. So I'm in that mode now where I have to accept that it's a little bit more reflective, a little bit less clear, a little bit more foggy, and to be okay with that. So that's the phase I'm in and going into is, what if in 5 years I'm not posting on LinkedIn? I'm not even in B2B at all. Might be, we'll see. But that would involve a lot more than a switch of career. That would involve a switch of who I am as I look ahead to that and starting a family. And I think every year's getting better for all the reasons we've talked about. The better your mental health gets, the better life overall is, better choices you make. And yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think I'm in a fantastic spot and it's going to keep getting better. But part of that involves like accepting times that are less glorious and more humble. I'm in a humble time, but I'm trying to enjoy it.
I agree. And then you can enjoy the journey, which is one of the hardest things for human beings to do. This has been great. Where can people find you if they have questions, you want to connect?
LinkedIn's still the best point of contact. I'm pretty active. And if you want to get involved with something I'm working on, whether it's selling your agency to me, having us invest in your company, signing up for Aware, doing business with Revenue Zen, LinkedIn's a great way to find me. And then I'll be your point of contact to direct traffic from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex. This was great.
Thank you, Joey.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Mind. If you enjoyed what you heard, leaving a review would be super helpful in getting this out into the world. If you're looking for support, you can join our Slack community that focuses on mental health for professionals. Just DM me on LinkedIn, I'll send you the invite. See you next time.